Welcome, everybody, to Chain Reaction Podcast, episode 4, with my good friend Mary Akhavan. Mary is a certified transportation professional who works alongside the partnership team at RoadFlex, where she leads initiatives to modernize fuel and expense management through integrations and industry alliances. She's experienced on both sides of the desk, fleet operations and fleet supplier, and is a certified transportation professional through the National Private Truck Council, NPTC, which is coming up here in September. Mary is recognized for driving programs that improve roadside performance, reduce fraud, exposure, and deliver real-time visibility to both public and private sector fleets. Her work spans through the ecosystem of expense management, telematics, and platform integrations that change the economics of fleet operation, and she's a pretty awesome lady at that. I can speak to that personally. So first question, Certified Transportation Professional, CTP, because you always have that after your name. I see it on LinkedIn. So tell me about that.
Sure. CTP is essentially when you get that accreditation, it's basically saying that you've gone through the trenches of validating that you understand what it takes to manage a private fleet. Private fleets are cost centers, not profit centers. So it's a completely different lens that you have to look at everything from when you're constantly having to go to ELT and explain, why this expense might be up this quarter, or God forbid, accidents and maintenance woes and things of that nature. So really it's to understand the ecosystem of how finance, operations, maintenance, everybody has to work together, and all of your data has to be visible to everybody across the board in order for you guys to run a successful fleet division, and make sure that the people at B can validate you being in business next year instead of outsourcing those costs.
So you're like the MD of the transportation space.
No, not people. Plenty of people that I meet every day will forget more than I'll ever know. I'm just super interested in this space, so that's hopeful.
That's awesome. I mean, check her out on LinkedIn. She's been in the space forever, and she's served a lot of different roles. In this episode, Mary shares a practical playbook for real-time fuel visibility, fraud prevention, and spend governance. The conversation is going to cover public sector realities, private sector innovation, and why strong partnerships drive measurable improvement across the supply chain. Full disclosure, they are a partner of ours. We value the relationship. We're fully integrated with you guys. And, where most people, and you'll talk about this as we get into it, where most people just focus on the discounts, they're missing a lot of opportunity around security and safety of, the fuel side and what you guys do. What experience most shaped your operator mindset as you moved from FleetNet to Ram McNally and now RoadFlex?
Having stepped into the fleet space with only the knowledge that I had gained from operating a logistics company, building it from the ground up and operating it for 6 years, moving machinery all over the world, decommissioning machinery. We're talking containers and truckloads and caravans, and there's so much that goes on into that side of it, that I wanted to get on the other side and kind of understand, okay, well, what goes on behind the scenes in these fleets that actually have these trucks out on the road. And that's pretty much how I went from behind the desk to the sales side of the fleet world.
That's awesome.
Well, I did it in my 20s, Jerry, and I had a lot more energy back then.
3 years ago? That was 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, I saw something recently where RoadFlex is now into some of the public sector type stuff.
Yep.
You were granted something.
Yep.
When you look at public sector fleet realities and private sectors, what do you see? I mean, some of the differences are obvious, but what do you see as kind of the big differences, and what made you guys kind of look at jumping into the public sector opportunities?
Well, we have a lot of folks here that come from that space too, live, speak, breathe the language, and know what it takes to operate in that space. So it was most important that we understood that we had the right people in the right seats to even enter into the public space. But I would say that really the budgeting and procurement, cycles are just what the differentiators are. Private sector assumption fleets can optimize for cost, efficiency, innovation. They can do it on demand, right? The public sector just has a different reality for making any key initiative changes in the organization. There's like I had mentioned before, there's a rigid procurement process. There's limited flexibility in that. There's the annual or biennial budgets. There's just a lot more that goes on to it in the public space. And so we need to You have to be in a position to understand what that entails and be able to support that from the sidelines as a provider.
And have a lot of patience. You know,
Yeah, sure. A lot of patience, but then also to be open to understanding, it's just we know from the fleet world that no two fleets operate the same. Well, it doesn't change when you get into the public sector and municipalities. There's rules and governance, obviously, that's in place that's not going to stray, but you've got to be flexible and you've got to understand what matters most for that fleet in general and work alongside them to, make it successful.
great attitude. So I don't want to make this a rolling commercial for RoadFlex, but I've learned a lot about, fuel programs and misconceptions. And so you've been doing this for a long time. You talk to a lot of fleets, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So what do you typically see that fleets are unaware of that really kind of drive costs in their operations when it comes to fuel management?
It's a great question. I would say that ultimately it all comes back to the essence of being comfortably numb with having shrinkage in your spend. Shrinkage is just unaccounted for. That could be misallocation, it could be fraud. There's a lot of different factors that can go into that. And on average, it's about 11%, which is a lot of money. So here we are, with the second largest expense in fleet outside of payroll, and things are just going unaccounted for. So a lot of folks have the mentality, well, as long as that 11% doesn't go up to 12, then I'm doing all right. We've all accepted though that maintenance and safety need to be proactive instead of reactive, right? And I'm hopeful that with all of our initiatives and educating, the fleet community out there, that they're going to take the same approach with ops and finance and get their fuel spend under control.
What are some of the recommendations that you make around car control alerts and merchant rules to help reduce that shrinkage? And really without creating any kind of issues for the drivers, right? Because you want to make it as easy as possible for them.
Yeah. So first and foremost, don't assume that you already know the answer. You have to understand the operation. You have to understand how this business has been successful. We're not here to come in and flip the script completely, but we're here to show you how you can leverage your existing technology, and get out there and capture some of that 11%. And 11% is like kind of a minimum, it's the baseline of what folks are out there losing. But like any program, you've got to educate, onboard, and make sure that you have a successful implementation. That's all key. Drivers tend to really enjoy the flexibility and of all-in-one fleet card program. And I can guarantee you that they prefer to address any questions and provide feedback in real time as opposed to months later when invoices land on somebody's desk and they pick up the phone and, hey, can you help me understand what happened? They don't know. I couldn't tell you what I ate for dinner on Monday, right? So how am I going to explain to you what happened at the quick trip, 45 days ago? Real-time alerts matter. And I think that the drivers that are out there doing a good job, and technicians and employees in general, appreciate the opportunity to address things in real time.
And so what you just said, there's a big deal, right? You have typically finance that oversees the financial aspect of it. They get the bills, lots of
Yeah.
questions, all that stuff, and then you have the actual operation. So let's talk a little bit about fraud and what you're seeing out there from a fraud perspective. Which what are you seeing around fuel? That's surging. That's creating loss. Anywhere, mid-market fleets, enterprise fleets. I mean, you guys have fleets from everywhere from class 1 to class 8. So what are you seeing from a fraud perspective that is either new or surging?
With respect to fraud occurrences that are surging, it's pretty wild when you think about people that are still out there siphoning gas.
Is that really
Yep.
still a thing?
It really is still a thing. People still have hoses. They still have jet skis. They still have neighbors' cars that they can go out there and fuel. So, people that have padlocked those spend controls and are leveraging their existing tech stack start seeing the real savings immediately. But yeah, people are out there siphoning. They're cross hosing. They're fueling their friends and families' vehicles. But then there's also the issue of not setting up your fleet and your assets correctly. We got to account for the auxiliary equipment that's out there. We need to manage slip seat assets separately than we do for the asset that's assigned to the technician or to the driver. So I always suggest for fleets to assign the card expense management tool, whatever that might be, to the vehicle itself and not the individual. So I think that helps really with the visibility on things. Obviously, you still have a PIN and you know who's using it, and
I was going to say, how do you identify
yeah, no, there's rules and measures that are in place. We know who's there, but let's total cost of ownership and life cycle costs. Let's keep it with that asset. It's a lot easier to report on things as a whole when it's assigned to the asset and not the individual. But we still obviously have measures to track who's using it.
Okay. Going back to the public sector here, when you look at, municipalities, when you look at school districts that operate mixed fleets, what pickup and payment step ups matter most for them? Or what are you guys seeing? What are they talking to you about?
Sure, it's the fragmented systems. They have too many providers reporting in different ways at different times. So a unified payment solution, I would say, is the best tool, especially for mixed fleets. So as far as like an upgrade to your system, I would say move to a unified fleet card or payment system that can manage both the traditional fuel purchases behind the fence and out, in the retail world. And then also for the EV charging, most of the legacy providers that are out there don't even have the ability to provide tools for mixed fleets like that. And then they also have separate systems, for different fuel types that create a lot of complexity in the admin world and just like a fractured view of the total spend. So
it's funny because I never even thought about EV, spend, right? I mean, so used to traditional measures that's a whole nother thing. I mean, was that pretty simple for you guys to educate on that or incorporate that into the RoadFlex platform?
no, I mean, I wouldn't say easy, but I'm not an engineer. So listen, it's a need, right? And especially when we get out to our friends out in the West, or I shouldn't, that's not fair because I see a lot, look at what's happening in the New York City fleet with electrifying everything. But when it's a mandate, it's different than when people are just taking initiative to go out and do it on their own. But there's a need out there. It's going to happen. I don't think it's happening tomorrow, but for it to be a must for every fleet. But again, work with a provider that when you get to that point, scalability purposes, when you do have some EVs come into your fleet, that they're ready to hit the ground running and it's still the same business as usual with the drivers and technicians. It's one card for everything.
That's awesome. So when there is fraud detected, right? When a fleet does detect, some sort of fraud, and I know you guys operate in real time, so maybe this is not the fairest question, but
Yeah.
and the security measures you put in place prevent a lot of fraud from happening. But when you look at that, what's the playbook that you're giving them for recovery odds to be maximized? And really for them to learn internally so it doesn't continue to happen.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, first off, let's try our best to prevent it from happening. There are many ways to do that. But if it occurs, chances are we're going to catch it before you even know that it happened. And we're going to be proactively reaching out to you guys to let you know that this is an alert that we received. It's questionable to us. We're going to talk it through. So I guess like actual steps that are going to be taken are pretty basic of, let's first and foremost, uptime, right? If we have a technician and we have a driver at the pump or at the charging station and has an appointment to make, let's get him or her up, let's get them up and running and business as usual. We issue digital cards immediately in those situations. Some folks already have those digital cards in their Apple Pay or Android wallet. So we're not too concerned with the physical card itself. We've got the spend controls there. First and foremost, though, we have to be chatting back and forth with the fleet. We usually say within 48 hours, we want to be notified if it's not us catching it first. And then we're going to work, our customer success team will take control of all the steps to contact merchants and get all the information that we need to get a case going. And then also they're going to work with the fleet to figure out how this happened and what can we do to prevent it from happening again. So it's a very kind of like concierge white glove service from the customer success side. We don't just dump it on the fleet and say, go figure it out.
The critical part though is in today's world, you are preventing more than, with technology, with the advancement in technology and what you guys have done, you are preventing a lot of things from happening before they even happen. So,
Sure.
I mean, these guys are getting smarter out there because they're fighting around the technology and trying to figure out how they can get away with things. So
yeah, right. And then it's also too, there's, skimming concerns that people have that. So a lot of fleets are just saying, hey, we only want to use a digital card. We will make note, it's also our friends in AI. But hey, if there's been a couple fraud alerts at this particular station, we're going to let you know whether it's been your fleet or not. And maybe you guys want to not go to this location because some of our other customers have been having issues there. So we're constantly monitoring that. No, we're working with the merchants, working with the customers, obviously. But yeah, fraud's a real thing out there.
And then these are all best practices that you're making recommendations of for the space when you're bringing on customers?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, that's happened to me at that station. I didn't know it was a thing, especially in these smaller towns, and I'll tell you what, it's happened to me a few times recently. So digital, and some people will say, well, no, you've got to get away from a card as a whole. And I don't think that's the case. When you talk about getting into the OEM capability of fueling just by pulling up to the pump. I'd like to see when the merchants have that technology on site that can, supplement a program like that, because I don't know if that'll happen in my lifetime.
So let's look at partnerships, right? And maximizing efficiency across systems. What types of partnerships or integrations, create the most measurable impact for the fleets that you see when it comes to fuel and expense control? You guys take a totally different approach, which is one of the reasons we were excited to partner with you. But why don't you talk about that a little bit and best practices that you're recommending for your customers?
Well, the first part of the question is, what types of partnerships create the most measurable impact? And I think without any hesitation, it would be telematics. So we are leveraging existing technology that, hopefully folks are taking advantage of the great tools that are out there and using talking to their engine on a regular basis. So the fact that we can just tap into the telematics device and pull GPS, odometer, and fuel tank levels is huge. Every single time there's an attempt to use that card, we are pulling all of that information to make sure that the attempted transaction, is within the spend policy set by the company. We wouldn't be able to do that without our friends in the telematics space.
So, you gave me an example once when I brought you into an opportunity, and I never even thought about it. You said, hey, this guy, I forget what you said, this guy's got a 30-gallon tank or whatever, and he's got 15 gallons left, so why is he getting 30 gallons?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So there's going to be plenty of situations where there's auxiliary equipment, or there's going to be, situations where perhaps they have their own vehicle because something's in for maintenance, the company vehicle. And so it's, again, I think we're coming back to that real time matters. So in the event that, we're blocking the transaction and notifying the admin on their phone, SMS, text, and they have 15 minutes to contact the person and figure out what the heck is going on and approve it or deny it. I think that in that situation, that the individuals feel a little bit even more empowered. We're talking about drivers and technicians not wanting to take it on. What's the alternative? That they have to pull out their own credit card, figure out if they even have a reimbursement policy, and hopefully it shows up on their paycheck in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's not always fraud. So.
When you look at the people that you're talking to, and the different fleets, there's a lot of technologies out there. What advice do you give them when they evaluate technology vendors and systems, service providers, just to make sure that, they don't make mistakes, or, you kind of guide them, when they ask for recommendations on stuff other than RoadFlex? Like, what kind of advice are you giving people, or would you give people when they're looking at different options out there to help their business?
Sure. That's a great question. And we are, of course, device agnostic. We understand that we can't make those decisions on behalf of fleets, so we can only help them with the decisions that they've already made. But I would say first and foremost, it's just anything you can do to prevent silos is going to be of utmost importance. So integration capabilities is a great example for that. Like, one of the most common costly mistakes is choosing a solution that can't integrate with any of your existing systems. So ask about APIs, pre-built integration, so there's not a lot of runway for you to get off the ground running there. That's a lot of running. Sorry, I don't know how that even came out of my mouth. But yeah, pre-built integrations with your fuel card providers, your maintenance software, accounting systems, and any other platforms that you use. So besides the silos, making sure that those aren't in existence, or that's not going to be a deterrent. Customization and flexibility is super important, because fleets are not a one-size-fits-all. A good provider will offer customizable solutions that can be tailored to your specific workflows and business rules.
So when you look at what's coming out there, where you see the space going, what do you see that's going to emerge that is likely to, be influential in how fleets spend and manage risk over the next, 12, 24, 36 months? I mean, what are you guys working on? What do you see that is a need out there that can help?
It's creating collaborative environments, right? The most significant developments are not like single technologies, I don't think, but it's rather the collaborative efforts to integrate and standardize all the data. The move towards open platforms, unified energy management, embedded technology. It's all reshaping how fleets manage everything from cost to safety, making data, transparency the key to long-term success, is what I would say. So.
Great. So here's a fancy acronym AI, right? Everybody uses the word AI. Everybody thinks, you can go on the chat and it'll solve the world's problems. And a lot of fleets are trying to deploy AI to be able to help them in decision making. I mean, where do you see AI adding like real leverage when it comes to fuel and maintenance? And where do you see it just being noise and just, AI?
Yeah, AI is, I still don't even understand it. Like, I'm still learning it, right? So for me to go out there and tell people, well, this is what you should be on the lookout for, and this is what it actually does, is I am no way qualified for that. But AI, my relationship with it is to identify patterns and predict outcomes, right? That's what I think it's best used for. The way that we leverage it, it'll find anomalies and deltas and transactions, things of that nature. So I don't think I can say exactly where it's still noise. There's plenty of experts out there, again, that have forgotten more than I'll ever learn about AI. So yeah, but for me, I look at it as a tool to, basically just identify the patterns and predict the outcomes. And with systems like RoadFlex in place, we're also using it to find those anomalies that are out there.
I would say that finding anomalies and shortcutting the process from what could take you an hour and it takes it a few seconds is
Yeah.
where I find it most helpful. I don't think it solves the world problems, but I think it gives you some help as a human being.
Have you seen that construction site that has it? Like AI, let's have AI build this. It's like halfway built building.
No, I haven't seen that, but what I've seen is where some of these videos that I see online and social media platforms, where they can turn anything into anything and make it move and do all this stuff. They made a movie with it. I mean, I think that's wild that you could type something into a computer and then boom, something pops up.
Oh, let me give you I'll give my dad your contact information so he can send you the AI videos 20 times a day. So
I'm good. We don't need that. So you guys talk to a lot of fleets, and fleets always want to do stuff to help their business, but sometimes they're not ready for it. And so what indicators do you see that are really good signals that a fleet is ready to create automation and policy enforcement across fuel maintenance and compliance?
oh boy, that's a big question. I'd say that some of the leading indicators, or the best signal that a fleet's ready to automate policy enforcement is just like a high volume of manual repetitive tasks, like widespread inconsistencies out there, in any KPIs. I think that the issues point to reliance on human-based processes that are time-consuming and prone to error, lack real-time visibility. So if you're constantly seeing this in your operations and you're repeating yourself in conversations and issues that are occurring, well, then maybe it's time to start looking outside of your current measures and tools that you have in place.
I always hate the answer, because we've always done it that way. When you ask them, like, why do you do that?
Yeah.
We've always done it that way. Maybe
Well, I'm okay with that with recipes and things of that nature.
recipes here.
Great. It's great. Yeah. So,
When you look at the customers that you guys have and talking to them, and you look at leadership and some of their habits, sometimes they make I see a lot of people just say, hey, we got to do this right now because of that specific thing, and it's not sustained over time, right? I mean, it's a one-time change for some cost savings versus sustained cost reduction. What are you seeing that would be good habits for people to take on to focus on sustained cost reduction over time as opposed to just let me fix this right now?
yeah. So instead of having the qualifying event that kicks this conversation into gear, it's, yeah, totally that, shift from cost cutting to maybe cost per mile. That's something that you can start with managing your assets, right? One-time savings, those are often fixated on the nominal price of service and parts, getting a 5% discount on a tire order or something along those lines. But I think that leaders that achieve sustained savings, they're just pretty much obsessed with the total cost of ownership and cost per mile. They're looking at it from a completely different lens and a bigger picture.
Cost per mile is huge.
Yeah.
We talk about it on our side all the time.
Yeah.
When you look at human beings and individuals and talent, what profiles would you say best fit a fleet when it comes to a spend management program? How should leaders really hire, against that profile? What should they be looking at that would be good for the business and good for the drivers, so that it's not just we only care about saving money or we only care about making their life easier?
Yeah, I think ask people what continuous improvement means to them. That's a very basic, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. But I think as far as hiring folks that, if it was my business, I would start, by looking for who is, and if maybe they're already in that on that team, who's the process automation champion? Like, who is the person that looks at the way things are done and the way that we can do them better? But then I think also having like a strategic, finance partner, the person, your CFO, that's there, that's budgeting, understanding that the total cost of ownership analysis matters, strong vendor negotiation skills. So I think understanding that their role has a financial impact on every fleet decision that's made, from vehicle acquisition to turnover of those assets, is super important. Someone has to take ownership of that and make sure they're not stretched too thin. So person that turns the fleet from a cost center into a strategic asset, is going to be the person that's going to be your champion. Or
I
people.
I couldn't agree more. That is a great way to say it. When you do deal with CFOs, speaking of CFOs, right? And they want results quick and don't want to focus on the long term right now. What advice do you give them? I mean, it goes back to the other question I asked as far as sustained cost savings and as opposed to one time, let me fix this. But a lot of CFOs come in and want to make an impact quickly. Maybe you lose a customer, maybe you lose a lane or whatever the case is. Um, what advice would you give them?
Without creating the long-term risk.
Of creating the long-term risk, yeah.
Yeah, it would be the, invest in talent and people first. Technology is going to be there, but how it's being utilized will matter. You're only getting out of it what you put into it, essentially. So having people that go out there and evaluate and understand that they're buying on real value props and that they're buying from real people and not buying, like, as you had mentioned before, well, the discounts are good here, so we're going to go there where we're going to spend $1 to save a nickel. So I think it all comes to just investing in the talent and the people first. And when you do find vendors out there that you're interested in working with, talk about ROI. That's, is this something that we're going to capture quick? Is this something that I manage the expectations out? Is it 18 months out? Is it 8 days out? What are we working with?
So two more questions. All right.
Okay.
One I didn't. I always ask at the end, but here's one for you. When you look back, as you get into your 30s now and eventually get into your 40s,
Yeah.
when you get older and you look back, what change in what you're doing now around fuel and expense governance would you represent as your proudest contribution to the fleet industry? Like, what have you done anything that you could say, hey, these are my fingerprints that are on this thing, and I can look back and say I helped do that.
That's a really tough question. You know, uh, yeah, I've installed ELDs in trucks. Those have sat there for a few
Wow.
years. Yeah, things of that nature. Like, we don't, the installers didn't show up. Well, I know how to do it, and I've got all the equipment here, so let's just figure it out. Don't repeat that. Actually, I might get people in trouble. But I would say it's making it standard practice to manage all your expenses, fuel, maintenance, vehicle costs. Do it in one unified system. Do yourself a favor. Don't be spread so thin across multiple platforms and expect your folks to be able to manage 6 different screens for one task. It's just absolutely absurd. So instead of looking at each cost separately, fleet managers would use a single dashboard, see how everything is connected. This will let people make smart data driven decisions, but not only to cut costs but also get the most out of every vehicle's lifespan. So use the tools that you have, but then also work with the providers that understand that they all need to speak to each other.
Yeah, I can't begin to tell you how many people get lost in those siloed systems. And again, some of the questions I asked you, we try and solve the problem today because this solution might do it. But when you look at it holistically, maybe that solution isn't the right one because it's
Right.
not doing anything else. So here's the last one for you, and this is a personal one. So I always like to find out something new about people. So when you look at yourself, and if I were to take your best friend and lock him in a room and not let him out until they told me something that you wouldn't want the world to know about you, what would they tell me?
Probably that I have Rain Man like capability for 90s hip hop and 80s country music.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, those are totally different.
90s hip hop is my favorite. And like, but I mean, I listen to all sorts of music, but I don't think that people really catch that from there. Like, my father, who was not from America, he learned English through country music and old John Wayne movies. And so growing up, country music in the 80s was everything. So 80s country, 90s hip hop.
Country music is like a story with song. you
Yeah,
know?
and that's why it speaks slower, so people that are learning English, they can, they can use it as a tool. Like for me, I can watch these soap operas in Spanish while I'm working on my Spanish. I know what they're saying as long as they're not yelling at each other.
That is
So
interesting. 90s hip hop and 80s country.
yeah,
Wow.
but I get every word to every song. It's just weird.
So I'm going to say thank you to you. That's everything that I had for you. I want to close out by letting you know that Mary's built a career turning fuel and expense management from a liability into a source of intelligence. From her work at FleetNet, Rand McNally, to her current leadership at RoadFlex, she's focused on fraud prevention, roadside performance, and integrated visibility. This conversation, hopefully, is a reminder that the biggest costs of fleet management are also the biggest opportunities. If leaders design the right controls and choose the right partners and put data to work, things will turn out the way they expect them to. Mary, thank you so much for being on here, and I really appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate you and the whole Konexial team.